So I'm going to share with you some of the summer session benefits and why you might consider taking summer session, and why you might share if you are talking with, parents, friends, family members of why summer session would be an important choice for you this summer. Just kind of helps with that, I think. A little bit about summer registration and different resources to support you. And then we have a brand new program, relatively new, I should say, called accelerated programs that I'll share that can help you graduate a little bit sooner by taking summer classes. And then Brandy's going to talk more about the financial aid specifics of summer, and we'll of course answer any questions that you have today. So I'm going to try this video. I don't know if it always works when I'm sharing screen, but if it does, this is our summer session video. Oh, yay, look at that. Now let's hope the sound works and all of that as well. Oops. Oh, it's not picking up on that end? Okay, well, then we're going to not share the video. Let's see, we'll cross out of that. So yeah, it's something I can do like in person, but for some reason, Microsoft Teams or Zoom, whatever it is that we're on, doesn't particularly like that for the screen sharing. But we have a really cool video. You can see it on the CSU Summer website if you wanted to see that. But I want you to consider that there's some educational benefits of summer session. So first of all, it is a great opportunity to improve GPA. So typically students will take 1 or 2 classes. They're able to focus more deeply on those classes because they don't have as many going on at a time. And we tend to see higher GPAs in the summer compared to fall and spring because of that reason, I think. Also a great time to repeat delete a class too. If there's a class that maybe didn't do so well in the fall or spring and you wanted to repeat that again because you're concentrating more on that. Also, there tend to be smaller class sizes so that you have an enhanced learning community and actually more individual attention from faculty and an ability to get to know your classmates a little bit better. And then you can kind of more organically form those study groups because you know them and you see them really every day, over the course of 4 weeks or 8 weeks, whichever it is. It's also a great time to explore new interests, especially if you're in a program of study where you have a pretty tight schedule of sequence courses that are fall, spring, fall, spring. You can, add in another class in the summer to allow you just to explore something new. Or it might even be a good time to add on another program of study like a minor or change a major, because again, you're not falling out of sync with those more sequenced courses. A lot of students too like to take this opportunity to get the hands-on learning. I'm going to share with you that there's a couple of new classes and programs at the Mountain Campus this summer that are pretty exciting. So the College of Liberal Arts is offering an environmental humanities series of courses, and you can take 1, 2, or all 3 classes. They're all 2 weeks long. One is it's a philosophy course on ethics and the environment. Another one's more focused on writing in the environment, and then a third one on history and culture in the environment. So really cool courses. Again, take 1, 2, or all 3, and those are 2 weeks each. And then the Warner College of Natural Resources is also offering another class that's open to all majors, and it's called the Nature and Wellbeing. And so that's a hybrid course. So I think they're only up there for 8 days total, but there's some hybrid, online activity as well. So in addition to that, lots of research and internships going on. We've passed the deadline for study abroad for this summer, but something to think about in a future year. And then there's also time savings. So we always want to make sure that students are on track, to graduate, whatever that means for them. But typically that would mean in 4 years, unless you're in a major program of study or added a minor or something that would require more. But typically that would be 15 credits each fall and spring to finish 30 credits each year. So if you're a little bit behind on credits, summer is a nice time to take a class to get caught back up so that when you go into the fall semester, you're already at that junior level or that sophomore level, whatever it might be. And that can also impact financial aid a bit too, I think, if you get off course with credits. So just think about that as an opportunity to add in a little bit to stay on track or even get ahead. It also is a nice opportunity to lighten your course load in other semesters. If you are planning on studying abroad in a fall or spring, in that semester, you would only take 12 credits. So adding summer even ahead of time allows you to have that lighter semester. And then sometimes it's easier to get into a course in the summer if there is typically a long wait list in fall and spring. So it's good to be thinking about that, so you don't end up getting kind of behind because you can't get into the class that you need in the fall and spring. And then finally, there are some financial benefits. We're going to talk about the financial aid, of course, but you can also save money by graduating earlier or at least on time, because then you're not going to have those added living and other educational expenses by adding on an extra semester or even an extra year to your time. Financial aid, it seems like we have more financial aid each summer as we go along here, so that's really exciting. And so if you can take advantage of that in the summer, it's really to your benefit. There's a lot of summer employment too. There's more opportunities to work than there are students to fill them, it seems. So those employers tend to be also very flexible with students because they know that you're a student and maybe you're going to take a, you know, a class and be really kind of busy and not be able to work as much in the first 4 weeks of summer, but that you'd be more available, you know, as we move on. And I am going to share with you too a graph of what our summer session looks like. So when I'm talking about like the 4 weeks, 8 weeks, and all that, that makes a little bit more sense. If you're in need of housing and dining in the summer, but just for a short period of time or all summer, there is prorated housing and dining in Parmalee Hall, but you only pay for the time that you stay. And then off-campus life has been doing more too to provide resources. They have a summer housing page on their website dedicated to students who are looking for housing or roommates or other services in the summer. Just practically, if tuition is increasing, it usually increases in the fall. So it might be the last time for you to take advantage of a lower tuition rate in the summer. And then certainly by graduating sooner, you can enter the job market sooner and start earning that professional salary. And that just adds up over time for your lifetime earnings. Oops, sorry about that. All right, thank you, Brandy. So this is the summer schedule for 2022. So as you can see, we have 3 4-week sessions, 2 8-week sessions that do overlap in the middle. So that's important so that you don't end up having too much going on, you know, during that overlapping period. And then there's still a lot in the 12-week terms. And as I'd mentioned, varying lengths. So the mountain campus classes that I mentioned are good examples of that, of varying lengths. Classes are offered face-to-face, hybrid, and online. But when we're talking about summer session today, we're talking about CSU summer session that our main campus students participate in. There's also CSU online, but that's not what our main campus students participate in during the summer. You will still register through RamWeb for summer session classes, and that's where you get to take advantage of all the financial aid and things that we're talking about here. There's quite a selection of courses, over 1,700 sections offered, and registration opens up March 22nd. It's the Tuesday after spring break at noon. And again, that's through RamWeb. So a couple things about summer that's important for you to keep in mind is that each of those classes have a very specific deadline to register, drop, and withdrawal. And you can kind of go by, you know, a 4-week class or an 8-week class or a 12-week class. However, because there's so many varying lengths, we just recommend go straight to RamWeb and look at the specific deadlines for that particular class, especially because in the summer, after you miss the drop deadline, if you do miss the drop deadline, you will be assessed 100% of tuition. There is an appeals process that you can go through, just like fall and spring, if there are situations out of your control that led to your inability to drop your class or classes. But we don't want students to have to do that. So just keep in mind that those deadlines are pretty important in summer. However, there is one deadline for the repeat delete submission. So if you wanted to repeat delete any of your courses in summer, July 25th is the deadline to do that. You're probably not going to see a whole lot of overrides needed for summer because it's a little bit tricky when you're finishing up your spring semester class and your grades might not even be due until after you've started your summer class, if you start in that very first 4-week session or 8-week session or that 12-week session, which is the Monday after finals week. So So you might not need a prerequisite requirement or override as you would in another semester. But if you had a time conflict, like if a class ended at noon and the next one started at noon, usually, instructors are really agreeable to doing those overrides in that situation, but that's a common one. And then also if you've met, if you have an unmet restriction, and that's typically grade level, okay? There's also a situation where if you would not be successful in the class that you needed prior, like as a prerequisite for your summer class, you would be expected to drop that class. And you might have an issue with registering if you're trying to register for both the prerequisite and the advanced class at the same time, even if they're like, one after another in those summer session terms. So just keeping that in mind that it might look a little bit different with overrides in the summer. So at summer.collegestate.edu, we have a lot of helpful information for you. First of all, we have a courses at a glance interactive course listing. And I like this in addition to RamWeb because there are some details on RamWeb you will not find here, such as the instructor of the course. And sometimes you need to communicate with them before the class starts. However, with the courses at a glance, you can search by term of summer. If you needed a class that fit within a certain period of time in the summer, you can search by AUCC courses. If you're needing specifically to fulfill an AUCC course, a core curriculum course, you can also search by the instructional method. So let's say you needed an online class or you really wanted a face-to-face class, you can search by that as well. So really helpful for you to have that. We also have a link to Why Summer, which goes through a lot of the benefits that we talked about here, if you wanted to go back and review those or share those out. We certainly have all the summer session tuition and fee information and those assessment deadlines, as well as a summer calendar. So some of those dates that I mentioned are on there, and then links to the financial aid as well. There's also a lot of resources for you. So some of these are already mentioned, so I'm not going to go into detail of them, but this is where you'll find links to go to the summer employment as well as the housing information. There's also an area where we have learning resources for you. So even though students tend to do better in the summer because they're taking 1 or 2 classes at a time, they still go by really quickly in a 4-week or an 8-week term in particular. So there are some tips on there to help you prepare for that kind of pace. There's also programs for admitted students on our website. So you can search by some research classes or service learning, things of that nature, study abroad, all that's there. And then other student support resources as well. Which I thought I had a link for, but I don't. So, but all the places that are available to you in the summer to help you with your academics and other needs that you have. Yeah, Ricky.
I wanted to make a mention for our students. You're still an AAC student, and you would still, our program is still fully active throughout the summer. So you would still be able to have meetings with your retention specialist, and we can even organize tutoring for you if that's an interest for you for your summer classes too. So keep that in mind, AAC folks.
Great, thank you. All right, so just a couple of tips in that in preparing for those condensed terms of summer. I would always encourage students to order their textbooks prior to the first day of class. You don't really have the luxury like you do in the fall and spring to get into the class and see if you like it, because if you don't stay on top of it the very first day, you can get behind pretty quickly. So be prepared to engage that very first day and seek help if you need it, because once you move into that second day of the summer class, you might already be on to a whole new topic and it's a little bit too late to go back and learn. So, so make sure that you're working with your instructors to stay on top of everything and build in more time to study to keep up with that faster pace. So assignments are going to be due and tests are going to happen, a lot more quickly than they do in the fall and spring. And, you'll get into your groove, but you really want to assess with that first summer class, if you haven't taken one before, really, how long is it going to take you to prepare and really engage in that material? So yeah, and then I would encourage you, like I said, it's a natural environment to get to know your faculty and your classmates more readily. So take advantage of that and meet with them more often during the summer. And then a couple of tips for the online, although I'm sure you're all a little bit more used to this than previous students were because of more online classes now, is that, again, you register through RamWeb for your summer online classes, and that's a little bit different than what you do in fall and spring, okay? The participation is still going to typically be through Canvas, although the instructors would choose a different learning environment if they wanted to. But typically it is through Canvas, and so you'll still use those Canvas resources that I have linked there on the page, canvas.colostate.edu. And a reminder that online classes are not self-paced. You do really need to keep up with all the deadlines as you would. Oh, and there's the summer student support slide that I thought was in there. So this is just a sampling of the offices that are available in the summer to you. And I think they're adding more, all the time. It seems the Chemistry Learning Resource Center, for example, is more relatively new than some of the others. But we're still open for business in summer. And like Ricky said, the Academic Advancement Center is still open and available to support you. So just keep in mind that those resources are here. And then, well, Brandy and I, and then also some other financial aid counselors throughout the month of March, just depending on schedules, will be available to meet with you to answer more specific questions about summer and the different financial aid options that Brandy's going to talk about. So we're going to be right on campus. Even if you don't have questions, come by, say hi, grab some coffee. And again, we'll be across campus, all these dates, and you can learn more at that short URL, or just go to summer.colostate.edu and look for our events page there. But we really hope to see you in person if you're on campus and you can come by. And then finally, I wanted to share with you about accelerated programs that I had alluded to earlier. And so what we have here is actually 31 programs of study. Once you look at all of the concentrations within each of these majors that students can choose to participate in to graduate more quickly by taking the same typical 15 to 16 credits each fall and spring, but adding on, usually it's 6 to 9 credits in the summer. Now, previous credits can apply, and so maybe you won't take as much during the summer or as many summers, but typically students, if they follow the academic plan from the advisor of these programs, they can graduate by the end of May in their third year or the end of summer in that third year, which still would be considered a 3-year graduation. So to learn more, go to acceleratedprograms.colostate.edu. And then, are you going to cover this slide, Brandy, or would you like? Okay,
yeah.
Great.
Okay. So again, my name is Brandy. I at least wanted to note that I did take summer classes when I was a student. Where should I be looking so they can see my face? Here.
Okay.
So I did take summer courses. I think it was maybe the second summer I started taking public speaking. I was super nervous about taking public speaking during a regular fall spring semester. So I took it in the summer and it was absolutely worthwhile for me. It was incredibly fast paced, but I felt much better thinking like, okay, I have a week to research this topic and present on it versus you have 4 weeks in a fall spring semester, and just felt heavier on top of my other classes in fall and spring. So it just made sense for me at that time. And then from there, I kind of started doing summer every summer since then when I was a student, specifically because I highly prefer taking 12 credits each semester in fall and spring. I did not enjoy taking 15 credits my first year. I felt like I was really stretched too thin. And I study a lot and really put time into each of my courses. So I felt like how I study and how I do well in classes needed a smaller workload in fall and spring. So that kind of recurred. I would take about 6 credits each summer. I did graduate in 5 years, but I also did double major. So it just made sense with how much credits I eventually needed to earn. Yeah, so that was my experience. Now this slide is kind of breaking down the cost of attendance for both a resident and non-resident student and helping you understand what it means if you stay past the 4th year, specifically in money that you potentially lose. And so for a year, it's about $30,000 for a resident student to pay to come to college for their tuition fees, rent, food, book supplies, all the expenses that go along with college. So not not only are you paying for that, but that 5th year, you're potentially also losing about $54,000 in income if you were working full-time that year. So in 1 year of going like your potential 5th year, you're potentially losing $83,000 of income. If you go 2 years, so potentially a 6th year, that's $167,000 that you're foregoing in income. Now that seems really extreme, but it's even more intense if you're a non-resident student. So for 1 year, going on that 5th year, you're potentially foregoing $103,000 of income and $207,000 for 2 years on top of the 4 year. So it's kind of giving you a good idea of like, okay, that like, yeah, maybe you do have some costs in summer, or maybe you do have to take out loans, or whatever the situation might be in summer is maybe a few thousand compared to 207,000 over 2 potential years. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more context of where there's a push for like, if you can graduate sooner, there's potentially a benefit of saving yourself money in your future. Do you want to know anything else about this slide?
No, I think just, and maybe I missed it too, just to be clear that it's the cost of the educational plus the foregone income. Yeah, is where it gets so, high, those numbers, but yeah, it is a lot. And it's hard to think about that in perspective when you're thinking, oh, I don't have a couple $1,000s for the summer, or I'm not gonna be able to work as much or things like that. That's why we're trying to give you those tools to see how you could maybe make it work.
And I totally didn't think about that when I was going into my 5th year. I probably could have done more summer courses and also potentially done 15 credits and still have graduated within the 4 years and not had to take the whole extra year. So it's helpful to hear that. So at least you know ahead of time what you're kind of buying into. This next slide is, there's actually 2 slides about financial aid that I want to talk further about. There's quite a lot, but I do want to preface it with that not all students are going to get all forms of these financial aid. That's why it's really important when we do have these summer sessions that Anne talked about, the different 8 sessions across campus. That's a good opportunity for you to come in and chat with us one-on-one, because it is very unique to each student. So what your friend got, or what your cousin got, or what your roommate got is likely going to look different from what you get. So I would always go in asking us what we anticipate you getting in the summer before you make decisions, just so you at least know what your cost is going to be. So the first are federal student loans. So those are only offered to you in the summer if you're taking at least 6 credits and you have not used the max amount for the annual year. So if you're a first-year student, your max amount is $5,500. So if you accepted that full $5,500 in fall and spring, you're not going to get an amount in the summer, possibly. Now, I meet a lot of students who don't touch their loans, and then they find out they actually can access them in the summer if they're in those 6 credits. So it can really help if you don't need them in fall and spring. I do want to note that there's 2 forms of loans, subsidized and unsubsidized. The subsidized loans are based off of need, which is specifically from the FAFSA. The unsubsidized loans are not based on need. So depending on your FAFSA information, you might have both, or you might only have one. Next is the grade level progression, which Anne kind of mentioned. So let's say you are a first-year student and you take 16 credits in fall and 16 credits in spring, and you did use your $5,500 loan. Now, at the end of spring, you technically are already kind of at sophomore level by being more than 30, which means you can get an extra $1,000 of a federal student loan. So when you become a sophomore, you're technically eligible for $6,500. And since you kind of made that loophole, you would get that additional $1,000 in the summer. Now, if you didn't touch those loans in fall and spring, that means you would be able to access the full $6,500 in the summer semester, as long as you're in those 6 credits. Like, that's the most important piece, that 6 credits is kind of where a lot of the financial aid lies, to be eligible for them in the summer. Now, the same kind of scenario is played out for sophomore students. So if at the end of your sophomore year, you're at 62 credits, you then can also get that $1,000 increase in that summer semester. So sometimes it depends. So if you did use those loans, then you definitely want to come in and chat with us. And if you didn't, same thing, we want to see what you're going to have access to. Next is the CSU tuition assistance grants. That has been happening the last couple of summers, but this summer has actually been increased. So there are more funds available for students. That is also a need-based form of financial aid. So you could potentially expect to get it in the summer if you already had it in the previous 2 semesters, so fall and spring semesters. Now, in the past, since the funds were not as big as this summer, we would typically recommend students the moment that summer registration opens up for you to add all the classes that you anticipate taking in summer, because the first round of awarding that we would do in the Office of Financial Aid would eat up all of those funds. So for students who maybe registered a week later or a month later and technically were eligible for the CSU tuition assistance grant, those funds are already gone. So they didn't get some. So we do anticipate it'll go stretch a bit further, but I still recommend to register as soon as possible. That way you can kind of try to guarantee yourself some of those funds. They are prorated. So if you're taking 1 credit, you'd get a certain amount. If you're taking 6, a different amount. If you're taking 12, a different amount. And it is also based off of need. So there's different levels of need with how the Office of Financial Aid functions. So some students will get different amounts depending on the credits and their need. But that is a free form of financial aid. It does not need to be repaid like the loan. So it's definitely good for you to get as many grants as you can in the summer. Next is the federal Pell Grant. So for students who were awarded the federal Pell Grant in fall and spring semesters, which is based off of the FAFSA and financial need, if you're in at least 6 credits in the summer, you can potentially get a portion of the Pell Grant. Now, let me give you a scenario, because some people are like, well, how much? And this is kind of how I frame it to them. So let's say you had the highest need of financial aid and you got a $6,000 Pell Grant for the academic year, fall and spring. That is $3,000 for fall being full-time and $3,000 for spring being full-time. Now in the summer, if you're full-time, you would also have access to potentially $3,000. But most students don't go full-time in summer. Most students go 6 credits. So you'd get half of that $3,000. So I think a lot of times students are not sure what those numbers are, but you can kind of imagine it as being half of what you got in fall or half of what you got in spring. That's kind of fair to kind of guess, but again, contact our office and we can give it to you specifically so you don't have to kind of calculate that out. Next is the Western Undergraduate Exchange. That is for non-resident students. For non-resident students who have this award, they are fully aware of that award. It is the best scholarship that you can get as a non-resident student at CSU, around $10,100 off for an academic year. And so the way that that works is a student is charged 150% of the resident rate. So each semester they have a discounted price of their tuition in comparison to non-resident students who do not have WUI. So it's really beneficial. Now that scholarship typically is only available for 8 consecutive semesters. However, summer is a freebie. So a student can use it for every single summer they're a student in between those 8 semesters and have it cover, but not count towards one of those 8. I don't think a lot of students know about that. So if you do have WUI and you are going to take summer credits, it's definitely going to be worth your while. There's a couple more that I don't have mentioned on here, but in the rare scenario where let's say there is a student who used up their max amount of financial aid in the form of loans, they don't have a grade level progression, and none of these other forms of financial aid meet their criteria. They don't fall in line with any of these. There is also always the Parent Plus loan option if the student is dependent in at least 6 credits. So again, the federal government, 6 credits is pretty standard. So if the student comes into our office and we say, oh, it doesn't look like there's any aid that you're going to be offered in the summer, even if you take 6 credits, they can still apply with their parent for the Parent Plus loan. That Parent Plus loan, for anyone who's taken that out, is really good for the student because it helps you pay off your balance, but that loan is in your parents' name and it'll always stay in your parents' name and they will be responsible to pay it back. So that is kind of like a backup option if you don't have these other forms of financial aid. Worst case scenario, there also is private loans. If you don't get any of that financial aid and you for some reason can't do the Parent Plus loan, private loans are with private lenders. So you would have to do some research and find ones with good interest rates that you can kind of agree to. And those, there are many that don't require part-time status. So even if you were only in 3 credits, you could potentially apply for that private loan and have it pay off your balance without federal aid. So those are quite an array of different forms of financial aid. Again, it's going to be unique and individualized per student. So definitely come into our office if you are contemplating taking summer credits and just get an idea of what you can expect in some forms of support in the summer. There's a couple more that we want to chat about before we get to the next slide, but there's going to be summer work study, which maybe Anne, you can talk a bit more about. Yeah, and then I'll go on to the next ones.
Yeah, so the summer work study is relatively new. It's coming from the same investment of funds from the CSU system as the CSU tuition assistance grant that Randy had mentioned. So neither of us know a whole lot of details about the expanded work study yet. However, we know that work study in the summer has been typically limited, and they're working out how to how to allow more of that, starting with this summer. And my understanding is that will continue on to the school year as well. So if you typically are eligible for work study, I would ask your employer about that availability for summer. And then the other piece that we're still, again, ironing out the details, it's kind of hot off the press, is the flexible payment plan that's available in the fall and spring will be extended to summer this year for the first year. So if you are, if you benefit from that ability to pay over time and you're signed up to do that, you will be able to soon, not quite yet, but add summer into that flexible payment plan.
And if once we do get those details ironed out for the payment plan, just ahead of time, I think it's helpful to know some pieces that I've found in my counseling as a financial aid counselor. Some students are like, why isn't my payment plan like paying? Like, why am I not paying month to month? And they think it just like happens magically, but you actually have to go in and intentionally set it up very specifically through RamWeb. So it doesn't just automatically happen. And then number two, there are deadlines, at least for this semester. For spring, the deadline was February 24th. So a little over a month into the semester. I would anticipate that there will be a deadline in summer as well. So if you do, let's say you don't get financial aid and you do want to pay off that balance in full out of pocket, but over time, you're definitely going to want to know when that deadline is, because if you pass it, then that no longer becomes an option. It is really set in stone. So just keep those pieces in mind. So awarding financial aid. First step, of course, is registering for summer credits. Definitely 6 if you intend to get federal financial aid. The summer semester is considered like a trailer semester, which means the end of something. So for fall, spring, summer is a trailer semester. So it is based off of this current year's FAFSA, so 2021-2022, which most of you likely have that done already. So you would be able to have that in place and ready to go when you're offered financial aid in summer. You're notified typically sometime in April via RamWeb. You'll get a notification that you've been awarded 2021-2022 financial aid. It might say summer specifically, but you click there and it shows you specifically for summer. A weird piece about this is that summer financial aid does not disperse until 10 days prior to your first class. So let's say you are taking the very last 4-week session. That means, and I don't remember off the top of my head what day that starts. Does it say on it?
May 16.
The very last one is July 11th.
July 11th.
So that potentially means that your financial aid isn't going to pay until July 1st, 10 days prior to your class starting. However, summer balances are due on June 10th, no matter what type of course you're taking or what length of time. And so for some students in that specific scenario, it's going to be difficult for you to pay out of pocket when you already have financial aid that should be able to pay it off. And so in scenarios like that, just reach out to our office and let us know, and we would be able to make you late fee exempt for the June due date. That way you don't have any penalties, and then your financial aid will eventually pay July 1st, and you will have everything kind of set up before, I guess, the rest of summer. So keep that in mind. I don't want you all to be negatively penalized when there is an avenue for you not to have that happen to you. But I don't know how often students take just that one. semester.
Yeah, probably not as much. Most students will take the first 4 weeks and the first 8 weeks is what we see with undergraduates.
Okay. And then same as fall and spring, if your financial aid exceeds your balance, you'll be issued a refund check of the difference. A lot of people set up direct deposit on RamWeb because they want their refund check fast, especially if you're using it to pay for rent and food, which most students do. So if you don't already have a direct deposit set up on RamWeb, definitely do that. It's really quick, easy steps, and then it's on file moving forward anytime you're going to get a refund check. For students who don't do that, we often get quite a bit of calls of like, where's my refund? If you don't do it electronically, it's a physical check and it takes so much longer to get to you. We only send those out 3 times a month. And once it gets sent out, it's sent out through the postal service. So it's on their time of when it gets to you. And especially if you don't live in Fort Collins and you live in a different state, or your parents live in a different state and that's the address you have, it could take a while to get to you. So just generally speaking, if you ever get refunds, set up direct deposit. Now, we talked about a lot of different forms of financial aid. This doesn't necessarily fit financial aid, but it still is a benefit to students who are non-residents. So we talked about non-residents with WUI have a discount, specifically with a WUI summer freebie. Resident students have potential forms of financial aid they could be offered, but what about non-resident students? So last summer, we had a 30% discount for the non-resident tuition rate specifically in the summer, and that is continuing on this summer. And so we do have the tuition and fee charts. There's a link here, but we also have it on the financial aid website. So if you're taking 6 credits as a non-resident student, it'll show you how much you're going to end up paying after the 30% discount. So know that that is an option for you all this summer. This last slide, I have never actually worked with this. I've never seen a student actually do this, but it's good to know in case you can utilize it if it does fit your situation. But essentially, it's a form that you can access on our website to try to see if your scholarship, specifically an external scholarship separate from CSU, would be willing to offer you their scholarship, not for fall, not for spring anymore, but now for summer. Most scholarships are not in the summer, but we hope to give you this form so you can access it, send it to whoever your donor is, and see if they're willing to make an exception and offer you that specific scholarship in the summer. And so it does have a lot of like criteria. Like it wouldn't just be like, oh, I just feel like taking this summer class. It's like, does this class, is it necessary for you to graduate within whatever time frame you want to graduate? Is this something that your advisor thinks that's necessary? Like, let's say it's a prerequisite and you need to take it so you can take your fall credits in the correct sequence. So there's very specific reasons why you would need to use this. But if it does fit your situation, access the link that's in here, complete the form, and see if there's a way for you to get that summer scholarship potentially. And that was all for financial aid. So yeah, if you all have any questions for Anne or myself, just let us know. You do have some time.
Feel free to unmute or type in the chat box.
I'll share with you my summer experience too. When I was an undergraduate, I was at the University of Minnesota and we had a trimester system. And so I really wanted to study abroad, but if I did that, it would be during a normal semester and I would actually miss 2 trimesters. So it would be really hard for me to graduate on time. So I was able to study abroad in the summer. And so, so I built that into my schedule and I did two different summers. I was really fortunate to be able to do that. And then my 3rd summer, I did my internship. And so it was really great to have those designated periods of time to get hands-on and, new experiences, but still be able to stay on track with the fall and spring. So I still graduated at the end of that 4 years with doing that. I think I ended up having a little bit more credit than I needed to, but yeah. So that's how I like to take advantage of those summers when I was an undergraduate.
Looks like we have a hand raised.
Great.
Lisa, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, so when does the summer registration open? Like when can we start registering?
Tuesday, March 22nd, it opens at noon. If you look at RamWeb, you'll see your specific time period where you can register because they can't flood the system and have everybody register at noon on the 22nd. So if you go to RamWeb, it will show you a specific time period that afternoon.
Okay, the 22nd of this month. Sorry, the first part kind of cut out.
Yep, March 22nd, the Tuesday after spring break.
Okay, cool. And then I have another question. So based on the slide where it was showing like the length of the terms in the summer, like 4 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever, do we get to choose the length of the terms or is it just whatever the professor requires for their class?
Yeah, whatever the class, however it's set up, yes. But you might find that, so for example, you might find that you'll have a, let's say an English course that's available the first 4 weeks in person, but it might also be offered in that second 4-week session online or even a session online. So oftentimes a real popular course like that, an AUCC course or just a class that has a lot of students, will be offered a couple of different times in different ways over the summer. You're gonna find if you're doing a lab science, those are more in the second 8-week terms. So that June 13th through August 7th, that's where you'll find more of those. And those are typically more on campus as well. They, all went online for a while last year, more were coming back and we're seeing more of those, science, math and engineering classes in person again this summer.
Okay. Okay, cool. Thank you. I have one more question. Sorry. Where can I find where can we find information like professors who teach courses in the summer? Like where can we find their email, phone numbers, all that, etc. Through RamWeb, or because I was trying to get a hold of a professor, but I don't know what their email is or any of that.
Yes, the instructor information is in RamWeb,
Oh.
not through the CSU summer website, but we do have
Oh.
that filter of classes in the CSU summer website. But sometimes they don't have those instructors posted yet, so it kind of depends. If you don't see the instructor, I would contact the department. Just each department will have like where their department chair or department head, works in that department, and somebody in that office should be able to help you find, if it's not that particular instructor, if they're not assigned yet, they'll be able to find someone who teaches that course that can give you a syllabus and all that information that you need.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. That's all the questions I had. I think there's a question in the chat as well from someone else.
Yeah, so we do have a question. It's does the AAC have a scholarship for the summer, and what is the due date? So I can help answer some of that.
Yeah.
So we don't have a scholarship. We do have a grant that would be available. Those funds are quite limited, and they're only going to be available for the first 4-week terms. So if you're looking at the same graph here, it's only going to be available the first 4-week terms because we cannot award it after July. And that's because of budget things and all that kind of stuff. But students would have to be selected and kind of like identified as eligible for that. And so we do all that work ahead of the time, and then we will message out to students to basically submit an application for that. So it's the same SGA process. If you're doing it currently for the spring, it's the same process. We just kind of replicate it for the summer session as well. So keep an eye out for that. And that would probably happen, oh my goodness, end of May, honestly. That would probably be when we anticipate some of that. Any other questions from folks?
I was gonna say a random note. I'm pretty sure this is in the summer, but my husband had to take, I think it was just an elective. He got to freely choose one class that summer on top of another core curriculum. And it was called The Psychology of Harry Potter. And like, we super love Harry Potter. And it was only on the weekend, so the varying lengths, it was only on, I think, a couple of different Saturdays, but it was a pretty cool class. I didn't even know existed. So we got super lucky finding that. We really liked it.
Yeah, I haven't seen that class in a while,
No,
but I
it was
remember
a
when
few
that
years
was
ago.
popular. And then like during the summer of 2020, when everybody was taking classes remotely, they had some interesting classes too about like journalism and how to be reporting and, media and all that was more specific to what was happening at the time. So yeah, check out the classes. There might be some really interesting new ones. Again, the ones that I'm most aware of are those mountain campus ones, and those are just so great because they're available to all students. You don't have to be in a certain major to get up there and take those classes, and it's such a beautiful location. There is a cost of housing up there though too, so that's important to factor in.
Excellent. Any other questions from our group today?
I guess I have one more. So remind me again, do we get to choose if we want to take the courses online or in person, right? Or is that up to the professor if they want to have it online or in person?
Yeah, it's going to be either scheduled as an online class or as an in-person class. But
Okay.
as I mentioned, typically they'll offer it in a couple different formats because they want students to be able to engage in however they feel, comfortable, or maybe what fits their situation best that summer. But that's more for the classes where there's multiple sections anyway. If it's not as popular of a class or as widely taken of a class, they might just offer it one way. But that information is up. So if you go to the courses at a glance, so go to summer.collegestate.edu and you'll see right on the homepage the courses at a glance search tool. And then you can search by class and then also apply a filter to see if you want to take or see which classes are offered online or face-to-face.
Excellent. And I think that's what we have for today. So thanks everyone for joining online. Yes, please reach out if you have questions. We will be available. And yeah, have a great day.
Thanks. Good to be with you all.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.